I'd like to introduce Connie from the United States. Thank you for joining me, Connie.
Hello, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good.
Could you tell us for what condition you take LDN for?
Well, I have Scleroderma, CREST Syndrome, and I also have Sjogren's and Fibromyalgia.
Okay.
So,
and how long have you had these conditions?
I got diagnosed in '92 with Scleroderma, and probably sometime later, 5 years or so with the Sjogren's, and then Fibromyalgia, probably right around that time too. They're just sister diseases of the other kind of offshoots.
Mm-hmm. So before you found LDN, what symptoms were you experiencing at that time?
Oh, I had like everything. Like with the fibromyalgia, I had all the trigger points. You could barely touch me. I was, I had all the sore points. I had lumps, sort of in my buttock cheeks. I had like, don't know what that's called, but you could barely touch me down there. It was so painful.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's trying to call me. That's what's beeping. I had irritable bowel, bladder infections. I had the foggy brain, with the fibro. I think you get like kind of foggy.
Mm.
My scleroderma symptoms were Raynaud's. It was pretty bad. I during the winter would have to take antibiotic because I was getting sores on my fingers. I had a very dry eye and mouth. I had to have plugs put in my tear ducts to keep the fluid in my eyes. I had a list of symptoms many years ago. It was like a whole page long that once I started taking LDN,
Wow.
like just disappeared. I mean, it was like, I know when I first did it, I typed up a whole list, I was very sore. Before I went on LDN, I had bulged two discs in my back and torn a disc.
Mm.
So that summer before I started it, I was in extreme pain. I was taking cortisone, and I was, when I stood up, I had to kind of take a minute to straighten myself back out again and be able to walk. So when I went on the LDN, it was such a noticeable difference because the pain was much better for my back. I quit taking the cortisone. I mean, like I would just, my balance was better.
Before you started LDN, though, if you had to have said what your quality of life was like on a score of 1 to 10, and 10 being the best, what would it have been?
Well, I think we were probably at a 1 or a 2. I was
Really?
I tell people I was at the end of my rope. I really, summers are very busy because we have our own business. We have a horse farm.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the kids are out showing. I'm expected to be able to move, and
Mm-hmm.
and I don't do my own teaching anymore, but I go with them to a lot of events, So, and with my back hurting that bad, and your brain, and I am older, I'm 58, so I was probably about 50 when I started it. But your brain kind of says you can do things, and then your body just sort of laughs at you,
Yeah.
and says, no, not really. So I just remember being at the point where I had so many things to do, and I just didn't have the energy, didn't have the stamina, didn't have, the pain control to be able to do what I needed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So what really happened is that my son has MS. And a friend of mine has MS. And when I called to tell her that my son had it, she said, I'm coming over, I'm bringing you literature. So she brought me all these books she had, and she brought Mary Bradley's book, Up a Creek with a Paddle.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, she wrote down this doctor's name that's here in our town, and she said, this doctor, this medicine, don't even try the MS stuff. So I started researching it, and that was like the year before, because in October of '04, I believe, or '05, I'm going to say '05, my son had his first MS episode. And nothing really showed MS. The doctor just said it was MS, like he didn't have lesions or anything yet. So I just got on there and started researching it, but the following summer, he had another very bad episode. He had optic neuritis and eye problems both times. So at that point, we knew we had to do something. And I got more into getting on the website and the Yahoo groups and talking to people. So a lot of people came forward at that time for me,
Mm-hmm.
who are just unbelievable. I'll never forget what they did, and that's why I try to give back too. So, but I got a letter from somebody who had a young boy with MS, and I'm trying to think of everybody's name now. Alcina for sure,
Mm-hmm.
and Crystal, and another fella. Boy, I'm on Facebook with him. I have to think of his name. He's the one that had somebody send me a letter, and when my son and I read the letter, he just looked at me and he goes, "Get it, Mom." I'm like, okay. So,
when did you start LDN, you and your son?
Pardon?
When did you start taking LDN?
We took it September of '06.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, yeah, about 7 years.
So when you started, both you and your son, did you have any side effects at all?
Say that again. I'm just having trouble. Your accent's lovely, but I'm having a trouble with it.
I'm getting over flu. Do you have any side effects when you first started?
No. Mm-mm. Maybe sleeping, but since I went through menopause, I have trouble sleeping anyway. And I think I remember being pretty awake the first night, but it was such a dramatic difference in my health and my well-being. I mean, and I don't know if it's because I'm positive and I really believed in it before I took it, but I started taking it even before my son. What happened is that we got it for him. And he got 1.5 milligrams, and I had to write it for like 3 a day.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew he wasn't going to start on 3 a day. So I started taking it before he did. And, I'm probably you're really not supposed to take other people's prescriptions. But he had a cold, and he goes, well, I don't want to start it when I have a cold. I'm like, okay, fine. So he started it probably a week or so after I did. And I mean, both of us said 2 things. First of all, I felt like I had my life back. And second of all, we both said this, is that we feel like we're put together correctly. Like we were all strung out before,
mm-hmm.
and like everything was now like together the way it was supposed to be. And his doctor, the neurologist, she said she would prescribe it. She fought us a little bit on it. But she said, I'll prescribe it if you take him down to the Cleveland Clinic Mellon Center, which is the MS center. So we did go down there, and by this time, him and I were like on top of the world, And the lady said, well, we know all about LDN, but we don't have any clinical trials, so we really can't prescribe it, and blah, blah, blah. And we said, well, we'd be happy to do a clinical trial with LDN. And I did try to get them to do it down there. She gave me a name, and I contacted them, and it never went anywhere. But the good news is that the Cleveland Clinic Mellon Center is now prescribing it for LDN, for MS.
I've heard that. Whereabouts are you? In Ohio?
I'm in Ohio,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I've had several people that have called me because, like my kids tell people about LDN. And so I've had several people with MS that have called to tell me they've gotten it prescribed from down there. So that's a big deal. Mm. And at the time, 7 years ago, I went to one of the top ladies there, and she was not doing it. So, but I ended up going to several doctors before I got one to prescribe it for me. So, I can tell you that since I've taken LDN, I've never had another ulcer on my fingers from the Raynaud's. I don't think I have any trigger points for fibromyalgia anymore. I've not had a bladder infection. My eyes are much better. I still have to use drops every so often. The pain in my back went away immediately. Mm-hmm. I mean, people here were like looking at me going, now what the heck happened to you? Because I could walk straight. I wasn't like walking crooked because my back hurt so bad. And it was just a remarkable difference.
So what would you say your quality of life is like now on that score of 1 to 10?
Yeah, I'm going to say 10.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. The other issue is I always had, because our Cleveland weathers, I'm in Cleveland, I'm by the lake, and we get probably, I'm going to joke about it, but I bet you we get 20 or 30 days a year of sun. We don't get a lot of sun, and in the winter, every winter I would get to the end of the winter, and I can't go in the cold because of the Raynaud's, so I'm kind of housebound. And I do go, we have a store on our property, and, I go to the store and I work, but, I mean, the winters before that, I could barely get myself off the couch to go to the store. I just was like a couch potato in hibernation. Mm-hmm. And after that, I mean, and every winter, at the end of the winter, I go, okay, I made it through another winter, kind of attitude. And after that, I mean, the first winter, I was like, wow, I mean, I'm just like fine. I don't have that, I don't know if you want to call it depression, because I've never really thought I had depression, but just not wanting to do anything, just want to get on the mm-hmm. couch and stay under a blanket.
Well, that's amazing. What about your son? What sort of improvements did he have?
Yeah. He has not had an MS episode. He had one little issue when he started taking it in September, October of 2006. And I think in February he had a little numbness in his legs. But at that point, when he started taking LDN, he was a college student, he was living on his own, he was supporting himself, and he was working like 3 jobs and getting a 4.0 in college. So he just felt so good that he was doing everything. Mm-hmm. And he was living with a bunch of kids that were partying all the time. So he got some numbness in his leg, no eye problem. And I believe they put him on a little bit of cortisone to get rid of that. And he's never had another problem with MS. And last year, a couple years ago now, his friend committed suicide.
Oh, dear.
And he found her. She was hanging. She hung herself. And let me tell you, was he messed up after finding her. And I said to him, I said, you're going to, kind of expect to have an MS episode because your body is under so much stress from this. Mm-hmm. I mean, he couldn't sleep. He was going to psychologist. He couldn't go to work. He was just a mess. And he had nothing happen. He had no MS symptoms pop up.
That's amazing.
And yeah, and I mean, I really attribute that to the LDN.
Mm-hmm.
And he's a strong kid. I mean, he's gone through a lot. He's 28. Is he going to be 28? He was born in 86, 27. So he's doing fine. He works for a stress job, and he is at the top of his game all the time. They give them a lot of monthly awards if they're at the top of their team, you know.
Mm-hmm.
He's gotten promotions. He's just, you know, and I'm not sure if he really had MS symptoms going on and he had some brain fog and some of the problems that come with MS, if he could really do what he's doing.
Oh, that sounds absolutely amazing, doesn't it, for both of you?
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, I would be a basket case if I didn't think that he had something that was going to keep him healthy for his lifetime and he could have a normal life. Boy, we're talking, and I just, you know, I mean, I honestly believe that this young man is going to be able to have a long, full life without having to deal with MS stuff.
Very inspirational, very. Well, thank you very, very much, Connie, for sharing your story and your son's. I'm sure that will be of great benefit to other users.
Well, thank you very much. I hope I helped, and if I can do anything else,
Thank you.
I'm a definite